The water was a silken embrace, a cool, liquid whisper against Marcus's skin. He sliced through the turquoise expanse of the pool, each stroke a rhythmic release, a meditation in motion. The late afternoon sun painted the world in hues of gold and amber, casting long, dancing shadows across the meticulously manicured lawn. This was his sanctuary, the one place where the noise of the world faded into a muted hum, where he could simply be. He'd bought the house 3 months ago, a sprawling modern masterpiece of glass and steel nestled in the most exclusive enclave of Northgate Hills. It was a testament to a decade of relentless work, of sleepless nights and sacrifices that had finally paid off. At 28, he was the founder and CEO of a tech company that had revolutionized data security. He was a self-made man, a fact that filled him with a quiet, unshakable pride. But here, in the crystalline water, he wasn't a CEO or a prodigy. He was just Marcus, a man enjoying the fruits of his labor. A sharp, grating voice shattered the tranquility. "You! Get out of there! Right now!" Marcus stopped mid-stroke, treading water as he turned toward the sound. Standing on the edge of his property, peering over the low, artfully designed hedge that separated his yard from his neighbor's, was a woman. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a crisp white tennis skirt, and a face pinched with disapproval. He'd seen her a few times, a fleeting wave from her car, a curt nod as she power-walked past his driveway. He thought her name was Carol, or maybe Catherine. He offered a friendly smile. "Sorry, did you say something?" "You heard me," she snapped, her voice as sharp as broken glass. "Get out of that pool. You don't belong here." Marcus blinked, the chlorine stinging his eyes for a moment. He was sure he'd misheard her. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my house." The woman let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. "Your house? That's a good one. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I know who owns this house. The Hendersons. Lovely people. And you, sir, are not a Henderson." "The Hendersons sold the house," Marcus explained, his patience already beginning to fray. He swam to the edge of the pool, resting his arms on the warm concrete. "I bought it from them. I'm Marcus Vance." He extended a wet hand, a gesture of peace, but she ignored it, her eyes narrowing into suspicious slits. "Vance? Never heard of you. How do I know you're not just some vagrant who broke in? This is a private community. We have standards." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Vagrant. The word was a slap in the face. He knew what she saw when she looked at him. A young black man in a place she felt he didn't belong. It was a story as old as time, a narrative he had fought against his entire life. He had thought, naively perhaps, that a multi-million-dollar home and a Forbes feature might have made him immune. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now laced with a cold formality, "I can assure you I own this property. If you'd like, I can go inside and get the deed." "Don't you move," she commanded, fumbling in her designer handbag. She pulled out her phone, her fingers jabbing at the screen with a frantic energy. "I'm calling the police. They'll sort this out. They'll deal with people like you. People like you." The words echoed in the sun-drenched air, a poisoned dart aimed at his very existence. Every ounce of calm Marcus possessed evaporated, replaced by a simmering rage. He had done everything right. He had played by the rules, worked twice as hard, been twice as good, and still, here he was, being treated like a criminal in his own backyard. "That's your prerogative," he said, his voice dangerously low. "But you're making a very big mistake." He watched, a sense of surreal detachment washing over him as she held the phone to her ear. Her voice, pitched for maximum drama, carried across the manicured lawn. "Yes, I'd like to report a break-in, a trespasser. He's in the pool right now. He's being very aggressive." She shot a venomous glare at Marcus. I'm at 128. Magnolia Crest Drive. Please hurry, I'm a woman all alone. I'm terrified. Marcus pushed himself out of the pool, the water sluicing off his body. He stood tall, his jaw clenched, a cold fury coiling in his stomach. He didn't reach for a towel. He didn't move to go inside. He simply stood there, waiting. He would face this head on. The minutes stretched into an eternity. He could hear the distant rising scream of sirens, a sound that had always made. His heart seize, a conditioned response from a lifetime of seeing flashing lights as a threat, not a sign of help. The woman, who he now mentally christened Karen, stood her ground, a smug, triumphant look on her face. She had summoned the cavalry. She was going to put the outsider in his place. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of his house. 2 officers, both white, emerged, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. They moved with a practiced, cautious urgency, their eyes scanning the property. "He's back there!" Karen shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. "The intruder! He's practically naked!" The officers rounded the side of the house, their expressions hardening as they saw Marcus. He stood his ground, his hands held loosely at his sides, open and visible. "Sir, I need you to put your hands in the air and step away from the pool," the older of the 2 officers said, his voice a flat, authoritative command. "I haven't done anything wrong," Marcus stated, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "This is my property." "We'll get to that," the officer said, his gaze unwavering. "Hands up. Now." Reluctantly, Marcus raised his hands. He felt a profound sense of humiliation, a burning shame that had nothing to do with his own actions. He was being treated like a suspect, a threat, on the very land he had paid for with his own blood, sweat, and tears. Karen scurried over to the officers, her voice a torrent of frantic accusations. "He broke in, officer. I saw him. He climbed the fence. He threatened me. He said horrible things." "That's a lie," Marcus said, his voice ringing with indignation. "I've been swimming, in my own pool. She's the one who started harassing me." The younger officer approached him, his hand still on his gun. "What's your name, sir?" "Marcus Vance." "Do you have any identification on you?" Marcus let out a humorless laugh. "I was swimming. My wallet is inside my house, the house that I own." "See?" Karen interjected, her voice dripping with venom. "He's lying. He has no ID. He's probably homeless." The older officer turned to her. "Ma'am, let us handle this. What's your name?" "Brenda Donaldson," she said, puffing out her chest. "I'm the head of the neighborhood watch. I've lived here for 20 years. I know everyone, and I've never seen him before." The officer nodded, then turned his attention back to Marcus. "Mr. Vance, you say you own this house?" "I do. I closed 3 months ago. If you'll let me go inside, I can show you the paperwork. I can show you my driver's license, which has this address on it." The officer seemed to hesitate, caught between Brenda's hysterical certainty and Marcus's calm, unwavering insistence. It was a standoff, a tableau of modern-day prejudice playing out on the pristine stage of Northgate Hills, and then the officer's radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, what's your status at 128 Magnolia Crest?" The officer lifted the radio to his mouth. "We're on scene, investigating a possible B&E. We have 1 male subject, claims to be the homeowner." There was a pause, a burst of static, and then a new voice came over the radio. It was the dispatcher, a woman with a calm, clear, and oddly familiar tone. "Unit 7, be advised. The registered owner of 128 Magnolia Crest is Marcus Vance. We have his file. He's the CEO of Vance Security Systems." A beat of silence. The air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. The dispatcher's voice came through again, and this time. There was an unmistakable edge to it, a note of personal knowledge that sent a jolt through the scene. "We also have a note on the file from Chief Miller himself. Mr. Vance's company designed and installed the entire city's new emergency, dispatch and security network last year. He's on our direct contact list." The two officers exchanged a look, their entire demeanor shifting in an instant. The suspicion in their eyes was replaced by a dawning, horrified realization. The younger officer's hand dropped from his, weapon as if it had been burned. Brenda Donaldson's smug expression faltered, confusion clouding her features. "What? What does that mean?" The older officer slowly lowered his radio. He looked at Marcus, truly looked at him for the first time, not as a potential threat, but as the man the dispatcher had just described. A man of importance. A man with connections. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "Mr. Vance, I apologize. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Marcus lowered his hands, a slow, deliberate motion. He held the officer's gaze, his eyes like chips of ice. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The dispatcher had said it all. But the dispatcher wasn't finished. Her voice, crisp and professional, crackled over the radio one last time. A final devastating blow aimed directly at Brenda. "And Unit 7, she said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Please be advised that the complainant at the neighboring property, Ms. Brenda Donaldson, has made 3 other unsubstantiated, suspicious person calls in the last 6 months, all of which were determined to be unfounded. We have a flag on her address for misuse of emergency services." The silence that followed the dispatcher's final transmission was absolute. It was heavier than the humid afternoon air, more profound than the sudden absence of sirens. It was the sound of a reality collapsing. Brenda Donaldson's face, moments before a mask of righteous indignation, had crumbled into a mosaic of shock and disbelief. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, mottled gray. "Misuse of—" she stammered, the words catching in her throat. "No, that's a mistake. I'm the head of the neighborhood watch. I was just being vigilant." The older officer, whose name tag read Miller, turned to face her. His folksy, apologetic demeanor had vanished, replaced by a weary professionalism that bordered on contempt. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a serious offense. Misusing the 911 system is a crime. And based on what I'm hearing from dispatch, this has become a pattern." Marcus watched, his anger now a cold, hard diamond in his chest. The humiliation he'd felt was being replaced by a steely resolve. He had been calm. He had been reasonable. That time was over. He took a deliberate step forward, water pooling at his feet on the hot stone. The two officers who had been treating him like a perpetrator moments ago now instinctively took a half step back, granting him the space he commanded. A pattern? Marcus's voice was quiet, yet it cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. He looked directly at Brenda, who flinched as if he'd struck her. "Let me guess. The other suspicious persons, they didn't happen to look like the Hendersons, did they? Were they gardeners? Delivery drivers? Or were they just people of color existing in a space you felt they didn't belong in?" Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never—" "You just did." Marcus cut her off, his voice dropping even lower. "You lied, Brenda. You told these officers I broke in. You said I was aggressive. You said you were terrified. Look at me. I'm in swim trunks, in my own backyard. Who's the aggressor here?" Officer Miller sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mr. Vance is right, ma'am. You made specific false allegations. That elevates this beyond a simple misunderstanding." "I want to press charges," Marcus said, the words hanging in the air with the weight of a death sentence. He hadn't known he was going to say it until the words were out, but the moment he did, he knew it was the only path forward. "For filing a false report, for harassment, and I want a restraining order filed immediately." Brenda gasped, a strangled, desperate sound. "You can't! It was a mistake! I'm sorry!" Her eyes darted between Marcus and the officers, pleading. "Please, I'm your neighbor. We can just forget this ever happened." "Forget? Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of any humor. You had police draw their weapons on me on my own property. You accused me of being a criminal because of the color of my skin. I'm not going to forget that. I'm going to make sure you remember it every time you have to explain your criminal record. The younger officer, looking utterly miserable, began speaking to Brenda in a low tone, explaining the procedure, the words citation and court date drifting across the lawn. Her face, once a picture of smug authority, was now a mask of pure panic. The carefully constructed world of Brenda Donaldson, head of the neighborhood watch, queen of Magnolia Crest Drive, was imploding in real time. Marcus turned his back on her, a clear dismissal, and addressed Officer Miller. The dispatcher. What's her name? Miller, seeming relieved to be talking to Marcus, consulted a small notepad. Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins. She's one of our best. Sharp as a tack. Sarah Jenkins. The name hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. S.J., his first intern. A brilliant, fiercely intelligent young woman he'd hired straight out of college. She'd been a rising star at his company, a prodigy in cryptographic security. Then, about a year ago, her father, a decorated police officer, had been killed in the line of duty. She had resigned a week later, telling him she needed to find a different way to make a difference, to be closer to the world her father had tried to protect. He'd lost touch with her, and it had always been a regret. Now here she was, a voice, on a radio, a ghost from his past who had just saved him from a nightmare. It all clicked into place. She knew his name, his company, his work with the city. She knew the truth instantly because she knew him. Thank you, officer, Marcus said, his voice softer now. Tell her I'm grateful. Will do, Mr. Vance. And again, on behalf of the department, I sincerely apologize for how this was handled. Marcus simply nodded. Apologies were easy. Actions were what mattered now. He watched as the officers issued a citation to a now sobbing Brenda, her tennis whites looking wilted and pathetic. The triumphant warrior of the neighborhood watch had been reduced to a blubbering mess, finally facing a consequence she never imagined would apply to her. The police cars pulled away, taking a piece of the neighborhood's placid facade with them. Marcus walked back into his house. The cool air of the central AC washed over his skin, but it couldn't quell the fire still burning inside him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a tremor in his hands and a deep, profound exhaustion. He sank onto a leather sofa that still had that new furniture smell, the scent of a life he was trying to build, a life that had just been so violently threatened. He didn't sit for long. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over his contacts before dialing a number he knew by heart. Jessica, he said when the call was answered. It's Marcus. I have a situation. Jessica Wu was his corporate lawyer, but she was also one of the most ruthless civil litigators in the state. She was sharp, relentless, and possessed a finely honed hatred for bullies. As Marcus recounted the afternoon's events, from Brenda's first shout to the final damning radio call, he could practically hear the gears turning in Jessica's mind. She has a history, Jessica said, her voice a low hum of controlled fury. The dispatcher's report is gold, Marcus, a documented pattern of racial bias. This isn't just a civil suit for harassment and defamation. This is a hate crime. A hate crime? Marcus repeated, the words feeling heavy and foreign. She targeted you based on your race and made a false report with the intent to cause you harm, both legally and physically. The police showed up with their hands on their guns, Marcus. This could have ended a dozen different, horrific ways. We're not just suing her. We're making an example of her. The conversation was clinical, strategic. They discussed discovery, depositions, damages. It felt a world away from the raw, visceral confrontation by the pool. This was his world now. The boardroom, the courtroom. A world where he could fight back with more than just his words. As he hung up, he noticed the blinking, light of the community forum on his laptop. He'd joined it when he moved in, hoping to connect with his new neighbors. Now, he opened it with a sense of dread. The thread was already there, titled Police at Magnolia Crest. The first few posts were speculative. Anyone know what's going on at the old Henderson place? I saw 2 cruisers, looked serious. Then a post from someone named Tom R., who lived across the street. It was Brenda Donaldson. She called the cops on the new owner, something about him being in his own pool. It was ugly. They ended up citing her. The digital floodgates opened. A torrent of replies poured in, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and, most surprisingly, validation. Doesn't surprise me. Brenda tried to get my brother-in-law's landscaping crew cited for loitering last summer. They were on their lunch break. She called security on my son and his friends for playing basketball in the street. They're 14. Finally. Someone stood up to her. She's been a tyrant for years. Brenda's carefully curated image was being dismantled, post by post. The whispers and private resentments were finally being aired in public, all because she had picked the wrong target. Marcus closed the laptop, the schadenfreude doing little to soothe the knot in his stomach. He walked out onto the second-floor balcony that overlooked the pool. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The water below was calm and still, a perfect mirror of the twilight sky. It looked peaceful again, but he knew it was an illusion. The sanctity of his home had been violated. His phone buzzed in his hand. A text from an unknown number. Heard what happened. You okay? SJ, he stared at the 2 letters, a small smile finally touching his lips. Sarah Jenkins, the dispatcher, the ghost. He typed back a reply, his fingers moving quickly across the screen, shaken. But I'm okay. Thanks to you. I owe you one. Her reply was instantaneous. You don't owe me anything. Just glad I was the one who took the call. Some people need to learn that the world has changed. Let me know if you need anything. I still have the complete audio recording of the call. Marcus read the last sentence twice. The complete audio recording. A chill ran down his spine, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was the thrill of the fight. Brenda Donaldson had tried to use the system as a weapon against him. She had no idea that he had helped build that very system, and now he was going to use it to take her apart, piece by piece. The next morning, Marcus sat opposite Jessica Wu in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. The space was minimalist and severe, much like Jessica's legal strategy. Between them on the polished mahogany table sat a small, unassuming, digital audio player. Sarah Jenkins had emailed the file an hour ago. Ready? Jessica asked, her finger hovering over the play button. Marcus nodded, bracing himself. The recording began. First, the calm, professional voice of Sarah Jenkins. One, what's your emergency? Then, Brenda's voice, high-pitched and laced with a performative panic. There's a trespasser. He's in my pool. He doesn't belong here. Hearing it again, stripped of the sun and the chlorine and the immediate threat, was somehow more chilling. It was calculated. Every word was chosen to elicit a specific fearful response. But it was what came next that made the air in the room turn to ice. Ma'am, can you describe the man? Sarah asked. There was a slight pause on Brenda's end. Then she spoke, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He's, one of those. Athletic build. Probably on drugs. He doesn't fit the profile of this neighborhood, if you know what I mean. Jessica's pen stopped moving. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide. It was the smoking gun, delivered in a venomous whisper. The coded language, the racist tropes. It was all there. Brenda hadn't just reported a trespasser. She had painted a target on his back. They listened to the rest of the call in silence. Brenda's escalating lies about being threatened, her claims that he was aggressive, all punctuated by Sarah's calm, professional questions that subtly poked holes in her story. The recording was a masterclass in manipulation on one end and de-escalation on the other. When it finished, Jessica leaned back in her chair. "We have her," she said, her voice flat and certain. "This is no longer a he said, she said. This is a woman using a 911 call to orchestrate a racially motivated confrontation. We leak this to the media. Her life is over." "No," Marcus said, surprising himself as much as Jessica. "Not yet. Leaking it makes her a martyr to some. It becomes a media circus. I don't want to win in the court of public opinion. I want to win in a court of law. I want her to face a judge. I want a legal precedent." Jessica studied him for a long moment. Then a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. "I like it. We bleed her dry first. Then we destroy her reputation." The lawsuit was filed that afternoon. A process server, a large, impassive man, who looked like a retired linebacker, delivered the papers to Brenda's front door. Marcus watched from his window as she accepted the thick envelope, her face paling as she read the first page. The brief moment of satisfaction was fleeting, replaced by a grim sense of inevitability. The war had begun. Brenda's response was swift. She hired Arthur Croft, a lawyer whose face was plastered on billboards across the city with the tagline, "Fighting for the little guy." In reality, Croft specialized in defending the indefensible, a master of muddying the waters and turning victims into villains. His strategy became clear within days. The narrative on the community forum began to shift. New accounts, likely created by Croft's firm, started posting, defending Brenda. She wasn't a racist. She was a concerned citizen. She was an elderly woman, terrified by a strange man on her property line. Marcus wasn't a pillar of the community. He was an arrogant tech bro, throwing his money around and trying to bully. A sweet old lady. The neighborhood, once united in its condemnation of Brenda, was now fractured. Battle lines were drawn on Magnolia Crest Drive. Some neighbors brought Marcus baked goods and offered their support. Others now refused to make eye contact, their cars speeding past his driveway. The low hedge separating his property from Brenda's felt like the demilitarized zone. Brenda, emboldened by her lawyer and her newfound pocket of support, escalated her campaign from the digital to the physical. 4 new security cameras appeared on the side of her house, all of them pointed directly at Marcus's pool and backyard. They were a constant, invasive presence, their little red lights blinking through the night. Then came the complaints to the Homeowners Association. His music was too loud. He was playing classical piano at a barely audible volume. His trash cans were left out an hour too long. The light from his office window was disturbing her sleep. Each complaint was frivolous, and each was dismissed, but the intent was clear. To harass, to annoy, to make him feel unwelcome in his own home. The breaking point came on a warm Friday evening. Marcus was hosting a small dinner party in his backyard for his executive team and a few potential investors. It was the first time he'd entertained at the new house, a deliberate act of reclaiming his space. The air was filled with the scent of grilled steak, the sound of quiet conversation and laughter. For a few hours, things felt normal. Then, with a sudden jarring click, Brenda's house lit up like a prison yard. High-powered industrial floodlights, newly installed on her roof, blasted his backyard with a harsh, sterile white light, washing out the soft glow of the patio lanterns and making everyone squint. The relaxed ambiance shattered. His guests fell silent, staring at the source of the blinding light. "What on earth?" one of his investors asked, shielding his eyes. Before Marcus could answer, a new assault began. The guttural, bass-heavy thumping of death metal music erupted from a set of large speakers Brenda had placed in her second-story window, aimed directly at his yard. The music was punishingly loud, a chaotic wall of noise that made conversation impossible. The message was unmistakable. "This is my neighborhood. You are not welcome here. I will make your life a living hell." His guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The multi-million-dollar deal they had been discussing was forgotten, replaced by the awkward tension of a petty neighborhood feud. The evening was ruined. His sanctuary had been turned into a stage for his public humiliation. Anger, cold and pure, washed over Marcus. He excused himself, his voice tight, and walked to the edge of his lawn, staring at the house next door. The lights, the music, the cameras. It was a siege. He had tried to play by the rules, to use the legal system, to achieve justice. But Brenda and her lawyer were playing a different game, a dirty, ugly war of attrition. He pulled out his phone and texted Jessica. "She's crossed a line. The lawsuit isn't enough." He walked back into his house, the cacophony from next door, still rattling the windows. He went to his office and stood before the wall-mounted touchscreen that controlled his home's security. It was his own system, the consumer version of the technology that powered the city's 911 dispatch. It was smarter, faster, and more integrated than anything else on the market. It saw everything. It recorded everything. He looked at the live feed from his own perimeter cameras. He saw his guests trying to make a hasty, awkward exit. He saw the blinding glare from Brenda's floodlights. He saw the vibrations from the music causing ripples in his pool. And then he saw it. A small, almost imperceptible detail on the feed from the camera covering his front yard. Brenda's Wi-Fi network name, broadcast with a strong signal. Donaldson, yes, guest, unsecured. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Marcus's face. Brenda thought she was fighting him with floodlights and loud music. She was a bully from a bygone era. He was a titan of the digital age. She wanted to play dirty. She had absolutely no idea how dirty he could play. The war wasn't going to be fought in the courtroom or across a hedge. It was going to be fought online, in the ones and zeros, where he was king. And he was about to burn her kingdom to the ground. The cacophony from next door was a physical force, vibrating through the walls of Marcus's soundproofed office. But inside, there was only the quiet, focused click of his keyboard. On the massive, curved monitor that dominated one wall, lines of code scrolled past, a silent, deadly waterfall of information. Accessing Brenda's unsecured guest network had been laughably easy, the digital equivalent of walking through an open front door. For a man who built virtual fortresses for a living, this was child's play. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't interested in her credit card numbers or her bank passwords, though he could have had them in seconds. He was an architect, and he was here to map the blueprints of his enemy's life, to find the load-bearing walls and the structural weaknesses. He moved through her digital world with the silent grace of a phantom, a ghost in her machine. He found her emails first, a cesspool of petty gossip, forwarded chainmails filled with thinly veiled racism, and angry complaints to various corporate customer service departments. It was a portrait of a small, bitter woman. More interesting were the drafts, dozens of them. Vitriolic screeds against him, full of the kind of explicit, hateful language she was smart enough not to send, but not smart enough to delete. They were a direct window into her poisoned soul. Then he found the financials. Not her personal accounts, but the records for the Northgate Hills Neighborhood Watch, of which she was the long-standing treasurer and self-appointed head. He expected sloppy bookkeeping. What he found was a meticulously kept and deeply criminal second set of books. For years, Brenda had been systematically embezzling funds. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was consistent. Inflated invoices for landscaping that never happened, payments to a security consultant who didn't exist, reimbursements for community events that were, in reality, her personal shopping trips. She had been skimming from her friends and neighbors for a decade, funding her life of leisure with their trust. The woman who had accused him of not belonging, of lowering the standards of the community, was a common thief. Marcus leaned back, the death metal from next door suddenly seeming distant and irrelevant. This was it. This was the weapon. It was better than the 911 call, better than the racist email drafts. This was clean. It was irrefutable. It was a crime that had nothing to do with him, yet it would solve all of his problems. But he didn't act. Not yet. The art of war, he knew, was not just about overwhelming force. It was about psychology. He would let Brenda think her campaign of harassment was working. He would let her escalate, let her feel powerful, before he cut the ground, out from under her. For the next week, Marcus waged a silent, invisible war. He started small. The smart thermostat in Brenda's house, which he could now control, began to act erratically. The house would be a sweltering 90 degrees when she woke up, and a frigid 55 by the afternoon. Her sprinkler system, also on the network, would turn on at random times, dousing the mailman, her prize-winning roses, and, on one particularly satisfying occasion, Brenda herself as she walked to her car. Her online life became a hall of mirrors. Grocery orders arrived with bizarre substitutions. Cat food instead of tuna, diapers instead of paper towels. Her streaming services would only play obscure foreign documentaries. Her social media accounts began auto-posting cryptic song lyrics. They were small, untraceable annoyances designed to fray her nerves, to make her feel like she was losing her mind. He watched the effects on his own security cameras. He saw her arguing with the grocery delivery boy. He saw her shivering in a fur coat in her own living room in the middle of a heat wave. He saw her standing on her lawn, screaming at the sprinklers. The smug, confident neighborhood tyrant was becoming a paranoid, frazzled wreck. Her lawyer, Arthur Croft, was not a stupid man. He filed a motion for a temporary injunction against Marcus, citing a campaign of electronic harassment. Jessica, Wu laughed out loud when she read it. "Does he have any proof?" she asked Marcus over the phone. "Of course not," Marcus said, watching Brenda's smart TV switch from a home shopping channel to a documentary about the mating habits of the naked mole rat. The digital footprints lead nowhere. It's the beauty of a well-designed ghost protocol. In court, the judge all but threw Croft out of the room. "You have no evidence, Mr. Croft. You have a series of unfortunate coincidences and a client who, according to this police report, has a history of making things up. Motion denied." Brenda's defeat in court seemed to push her over the edge. That night the floodlights were back, and the death metal was louder than ever. It was a tantrum, a desperate, flailing attempt to regain control. Marcus sat in his office, the chaos from next door a mere backdrop. It was time. He didn't leak the embezzlement files to the media. That would be messy and would still, somehow, make him part of the story. He chose a more elegant solution. He compiled the evidence, the fake invoices, the hidden ledgers, the bank transfers to her personal accounts, into a single password-protected file. He uploaded it to a secure anonymous server. Then he drafted an email. It was simple, direct, and untraceable. Subject: Northgate Hills Neighborhood Watch, Urgent Financial Review. Dear board members, it has come to my attention that a review of the Neighborhood Watch finances is in order. You will find all the relevant documents at the link below. I trust you will do the right thing. A concerned neighbor. He sent it to the other 4 members of the HOA board. Then, using a different anonymous protocol, he sent a second email, this one to the public tip line of the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division. This one was even shorter. It contained only the link and the words, "tax fraud. You're welcome." He leaned back in his chair and turned off his monitor. The death metal next door blared on, a soundtrack to a life that was already over. Brenda just didn't know it yet. The end came not with a bang, but with the quiet crunch of tires on a gravel driveway. The next afternoon, Marcus was on a conference call when he saw it. A black sedan pulled up to Brenda's house. 2 of his neighbors, a stern-faced couple who were both on the HOA board, got out. They held a tablet between them, their faces grim. They rang the doorbell. Marcus watched as Brenda opened the door, a look of confusion on her face. The couple didn't raise their voices. They simply showed her the screen of the tablet. The color drained from Brenda's face. The door closed. A few minutes later, the industrial floodlights on her roof flickered and died. The speakers in her window were pulled inside. Silence fell over Magnolia Crest Drive for the first time in a week. An hour later, a second car arrived. This one was a standard-issue government sedan. Two people in dark, conservative suits got out. They didn't look like neighbors. They looked like tax auditors with badges. They knocked on the door. This time, it took much longer for Brenda to answer. Marcus ended his conference call. He walked out onto his balcony, the one overlooking the pool. The water was still and perfect. The air was warm. His sanctuary was quiet again. He looked over the hedge at the house next door, where Brenda Donaldson's carefully constructed world was being dismantled by the very systems of order she claimed to uphold. She had started a war with a person she saw as a trespasser. She never realized she was fighting a ghost, and he had just exorcised her from his life.